Hi, this is Megan and Lisa, and this is our course project for community nursing. Here are our student identification badges to show who we are. And now will be our introduction for our policy and course project. This is our mentor. Her name is Shelly Perea, and she currently works at Altman Hospital in compliance. She was diagnosed with MS, so she is no longer able to work on the floor, but she still loves working as a nurse, so she decided to go on the administrative route. Shelly is actually my aunt, so that is why I know that about her. And also, it was really interesting to see her as a mentor and not just my aunt. It was really cool to see her in a different light. She got her BSN from Altman College and also has been a nurse for 15 years. So what's important in creating a policy and really for this project was identifying an issue. There are a lot of issues in healthcare, so it was difficult to find one that we wanted to do because there were so many. So we decided to focus on an active problem that's happening in the hospital right now. I have a job at Altman Hospital working as a therapy aide, and I noticed that there was an increase in falls. So I decided that this would be a great thing to go over and make a policy to help with the falls. So me and Lisa learned about the lack of reimbursement to the hospital for preventable falls. So this is huge that there is a monetary issue, and also falls increase the risk of sentinel events. Now we will have an audience knowledge check. What is a fall risk? A, spills on floor. B, pets, wires, or all of the above. The answer is D, all of the above. Now, we will start our body section of our course project presentation. This is about implementing our hypothetical policy. So first, we focused on finding a site to implement a policy. The site for a policy is important because that is the environment that this policy will be implemented in. So ultimately, we chose Altman Hospital main campus because it's something we're comfortable with and we are knowledgeable about, and also because our mentor works at Altman Hospital, so she was able to give us insider knowledge on the hospital that we did not have. Also, our policy, we noticed that with falls that, and like what we wanted to solve was clearing nursing hierarchy, because people who have higher positions in the hospital do not answer call lights as much as techs and aides do because they feel like they are above the techs and aides. Altman has a commitment to lowering falls and also to safety. They're something that they really focus on. And also, we wanted to establish hospital education protocols for house-wide education. To make sure that we were on the right track with writing a policy, we looked in the textbook to see what their guidelines are. First, it's important to have a plan, strategy, and also implementation. So without these three things, your policy might not be successful. And also the textbook talked about how you can't make a policy too lenient because people won't follow it, or if it's too strict, then people won't want to apply it and it will just make them angry. So the first step to making a policy is forming a team, because you can't write a policy on your own. The second step is assessing the environment and organization outcomes. The third step is making objectives from the outcomes that were previously assessed in step 2. And then finally, have the members of the team review every detail of the policy so they know everything is ready and correct.
Thank you, Megan. My name is Lisa, and I'm going to be concluding our presentation by going over the remainder of the slides. So our process to writing our hypothetical policy was, once we found an established issue, we started to dig into some research for potential fall risk. We wanted to figure out why patients were falling so often in hospitals and what were contributing risk factors. We came across a huge thing that contributed to risk was alarm fatigue in the hospital, which alarm fatigue has been addressed in a lot of our foundational nursing courses about it being a rising problem in healthcare, but further research really cemented for us how big of an issue alarm fatigue is becoming. And then our mentor, Shelly, helped guide us through the process. We had an outline of different fall risks. She confirmed that were huge in the hospital, and then we came up with a very rough draft of our policy, and she helped us with the format of an official policy and gave some recommendations on wording and content. And then we revised the policy, and once we revised the policy, we sent it to Shelly for final approval. So that kind of mimicked like an approval from a board in a hospital, since we were seeking input from an expert, so to say. So some sources we found for alarm fatigue findings, it was very staggering, some of these results. Alarm fatigue was defined as when clinicians experience high exposure to medical device alarms, causing alarm desensitization and leading to missed alarms or delayed response. It was found that delayed response is a huge contribution to fall risk because a lot of patients who had maybe bed or chair alarms were trying to get out of bed or the chair, and the alarm would go off, and by the time a clinical personnel would respond, the patient would have already gotten up and fallen, negating the purpose of the alarm. Alarm fatigue is a very well-known issue in the medical field. Like I mentioned earlier, Megan and I have learned about in our nursing classes. However, though, alarm fatigue events are very underdocumented, research showed. So hospitals might not be as honest in reporting falls that are due to alarm fatigue as they should be. And then shockingly, between the years 2005 and 2008, the Joint Commission and the FDA found that 566 patient deaths were contributed to alarm fatigue, which is very upsetting because if we think about it, these deaths could have been preventable if personnel had only responded quicker. Managing alarm systems and research findings. So alarm fatigue we found was the contributor to alarm neglect. Nurses were overwhelmed by the number of alarms they were responsible for and other duties. So this could be due to short staffing or not having enough techs or aides on the floor. So nurses would have to respond to these lights while managing the care of all their other patients, which could be really upsetting if a nurse was doing a dressing change or maybe doing an IV push medication and they heard a fall alarm, it would be very hard to leave one patient in an unsafe situation to go respond to another patient. And then this is a huge influence on the delayed response for these nurses. And this is from the source Sound the Alarm, Managing the Physiologic Monitoring Systems, which is actually published by the Joint Commission. So we thought that was a very good source to seek out information on this issue. Here's another audience engagement. What are 2 things you can do as a student nurse to help reduce falls on your unit? To brainstorm some ideas, it could be student nurses could act as extra personnel responding to alarms, even if it's not your assigned patient. Scanning an environment for safety risks, notifying the nurse of any falls, staying with the patient if you notice they fall, or working with environmental services to clean up any spills, hazards, or anything that the student nurse might know. Student nurses are key to assessing and protecting patients while their clinicals are going on. Here is a summary of kind of our whole project, the hypothetical policy rewrote, and why we felt the need for it. So part 1 of our hypothetical policy, as you can see, we tried to keep this as realistic as possible. In our template of the policy, Shelley was really great in kind of helping us set up everything from the title to what kind of different subjects needed to be on the policy. So the policy we had was regulation of education for all levels of clinical staff. This policy is engaged for anyone from physicians, residents, aides, dietary techs, nurses, advanced practice nurses, anyone who is licensed or in their job descriptions to have patient involvement. It was approved by Megan and I. The purpose was to provide very specific guidelines and instructions on how to identify fall risks and delegate the responsibilities in preventing patient fall incidents. Our objective was to have a very plain language, standardized policy in education so everyone in the clinical staff could understand. We wanted to educate all the members of the clinical staff on bed alarms, chair alarms, and the difference in those, how those sound versus maybe IV alarms, and who had to take responsibilities for these alarms. And obviously a huge thing was with this policy was to promote patient safety and keep patient environments very clutter-free. Our policy very clearly states if there is an alarm signal, the closest clinical staff who is free must respond. All clinical staff is responsible for responding to alarms. So, for example, a physician should not go pull a nurse from his or her duties to respond to an alarm if the physician is out in the hallway or already in the patient room. This goes further down the hierarchy. A nurse should not pull an aide to go answer a light if the nurse is free and right by the room. Whoever is close by must respond to the alarm. Also, all clinical staff will agree they accept responsibility to scan a room for safety risk whenever they are in the room. It doesn't matter if it is a checkup or giving medication, giving a meal. Whenever a clinical staff is in the room, they should be scanning and assessing the environment for fall risk, like we mentioned earlier. Rugs, spills, clutter, their walking aid or device is out of their reach, making sure the bed is locked. Top side rails are up. Safety and assessment is a huge part of this policy. The second part of our policies is the procedures. So these are kind of the outcomes we wish to have. So staff after completing our education should be able to identify the difference in alarm sounds. So they should know when to respond urgently when it is a bed or chair alarm versus maybe an IV going off. They need to understand that all clinical staff is responsible for call lights or ensuring a patient safe environment, and it should not be delegated if staff is free. And if they do delegate, it should be used appropriately. So if a nurse is not free, if they have a medication pass, it would be appropriate to delegate an alarm to a tech who is free, and so on. Nurses will respond if they are free and a patient care technician is not close by. Residents or physicians will also respond to alarms if present in the room. No employee should leave the patient alone at any point to go get another staff member to delegate the alarm. If a person is in the room, they accept responsibility for responding to that alarm. Staff should be able to verbally identify risk in the patient environment. Staff will promote non-slip footwear in patients. Non-slip footwear, we found, really reduces falls. They will ensure wires or tubings will not get caught, tangled, or trip the patient across the floor. They will ensure there are no rugs or anything a patient can trip on, and they will try to reduce clutter. So clutter-free is safe. So these are basically our procedures in our very plain language policy. To sum it all up, a need for a hypothetical policy. We feel that educated staff will be more likely to respond, because going back to a learning theory, we should always try to have an understanding of education. The more people understand the need for something, the more willing they are to respond. We think that with having staff more aware, they will more likely react and have action. The redistribution of call light and environmental safety responsibilities will be more evenly dispersed to helpfully lessen the workload, which will contribute to less of a delayed response to alarms. And of course, patient safety is a priority. Here are our references, and we thank you for tuning into our presentation. This was a great course project. I feel like Megan and I learned a lot, and it was great to try to be on the administrative side of nursing instead of just focusing on skills or the bedside. Thank you, everyone.